Torres of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, Fox Sports Radio, Kentucky Sports Radio. The list continues to grow. AT, you had somebody on your podcast that we've been talking about for the last 2 years. And it was a good one, too. You must have enjoyed your time with Mason Jones.
Yeah, thank you for plugging that, Phil. Excuse me, I did have Mason Jones on earlier this week. Interview is tagged on my Twitter page, at Aaron_Torres, for people that want to find it. Mace was one of the most engaging, enjoyable interviews that I've ever done. And I've interviewed Hall of Fame coaches, media members, you name it. And I'm not saying it to brag. I'm just saying it that his journey, I don't think I realized where he started as a 270-pound high school junior, not even playing basketball, getting himself in shape, making the team his senior year, then going to junior college before ending up at Arkansas. It was, it's not often that we sit here and what we do and you just kind of sit there and put your jaw on the ground as somebody else talks. But that was exactly my experience talking to Mason Jones the other day. I encourage everybody listening to go find that interview after halftime, of course.
I think when you listen to Mason talk and when you watch him play as much as we did, as much as you did, you have a really difficult time discounting somebody like that. Let the scouts, let the general managers of the NBA discount him over the 2-round NBA draft. But when you watch a guy put the ball in the hole as much as he did in so many different ways, and then and I know you got this sense from talking to him, Mason always feels like he's got not just something to prove, but a ton to prove. And someone that plays with a chip on his shoulder every single game, that he's got to prove something to everybody else, is a dangerous guy. And for me, that's Mason Jones.
Phil, I agree 100% with you. And, it's something we talked about a few weeks ago, when I joined you, is, I think this narrative that you have to take the younger player in the NBA draft, and for people who are maybe a little more acclimated with the football draft, kind of the thought in basketball, and I think you would probably say the same about baseball, is, well, the kid that's 18, 19 years old in baseball, straight out of high school, and in basketball 1 year removed from high school, well, you have to take that kid because his upside is too great to pass up. And I think that narrative is starting to change in basketball, where you're starting to see, kids that have been in college for 2 or 3 years. And it's exactly what you said, Phil. They've battled through adversity. They haven't been the best player on their team at every level the way that maybe a McDonald's All-American freshman one-and-done type kid has been. Those are the kids that I think are, frankly, if we're being perfectly honest, having success at the NBA level. That's not to say that there isn't the occasional Zion Williamson who has an immediate impact in college and then goes to the NBA and the same. But I think, these NBA teams, I think, are starting to realize there's a value to a kid that has some dirt under his fingernails, grit, with what he did. And I think that plays a factor. It was funny, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. But I think that, you look back at that NBA Finals last year, Kevin Durant goes out with injury. Basically, everybody else on the floor had played 2, 3, 4 years of college basketball, whether it was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson before he got hurt, Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, etc. So I don't know if that hurts. I don't know if that helps. I don't know if it matters in the case of Mason Jones. But I'm 100% on board with you. When people start doing their research and digging in, I think it's going to be hard to discount that kid and everything he's overcome.
I travel with the women's basketball team, and even the coaches with Arkansas women's basketball, when we would talk about the men's team, and specifically about just the personalities, when you would hear Mason Jones on a press conference or have a conversation with him off the court, he's a different sort of a guy. You know what I mean? The way he speaks. The women's coaches would say, that's just Mason. That's Mace. I didn't hear them say that about anybody else. I thought that described him well. What sense of a type of person did you get from your conversation with him?
Well, I think the biggest thing I took away was, one, obviously, look, he talks more than most high-level NBA draft prospects, and it was great for me. Will that concern an NBA team? Maybe, but he's not afraid to speak his mind. What I actually really respected about him during that interview was he wasn't afraid to admit that exactly what you just said, Phil. One, that I have a chip on my shoulder, and two, I'm just going to say it. I think NBA teams are underappreciating me, and it's so funny because in this political era, correctness, the time that we live in, I'm just trying to get better every day, and you know what all the cliches are. This kid was not about cliches. He said what was on his mind. He spoke his version of the truth, and I respected that. In terms of the type of kid he is, Bill, you guys were probably around him more than I would to speculate on that, but I don't think anybody could listen to my interview with him, any interview that he's done, or just simply watch him on the court and not say that this is a kid who eats, sleeps, and breathes basketball. As best I can tell, has never had any issues off the court, and just wants, his whole life is turning himself into the best basketball player that he can be. You nailed on the head, Phil. Any team that listens to an interview like that or gets time with him, I don't know how you can't come out of it saying, man, I want that guy to be part of my organization.
Talking to Aaron Torres here on Halftime. Aaron, just out of curiosity, too, Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe both, and we'll bring Isaiah into this conversation, too. The most recent ESPN mock drafts, neither of those players are in the top 60 of the mock draft. Is there any reason why you think that neither of these players are being considered for high draft picks?
I think, honestly, I'll be perfectly honest with you guys. I'll be 100% blunt because that's what I am. That's what Mason Jones is. That's what all the greats are. I think that most of the people that do the mock drafts don't really know what they're doing. I'm going to be perfectly blunt with you. And what I will say is, in defense of a lot of people, listen, they are getting, in the cases of the good ones, they're getting their information from people in the NBA. But let's be honest. In the NBA, there are good GMs and bad GMs, prepared GMs and bad GMs. Guys that have spent the last 2-3 years doing their homework in anticipation of this evening or of that one night in June when it usually is, July, August, whenever it'll be this year. And then there are guys that like to play catch-up in March and April and May and really do use the NCAA tournament as something of probably a bigger barometer than they should when evaluating these players. And so I only bring that up to say, I was a little tongue-in-cheek critical of the mock draft guys, but they are getting their information from somewhere. And I think a lot of the NBA guys are still playing catch-up on a kid like Mason Jones. Listen, this is a kid, unless you went to an Arkansas game, I had somebody bring this point up to me about Mace this year, is that because the team struggled so much, say you're an NBA scout and you're on the road, the Arkansas game, and this is no disrespect, but I think you guys will understand what I'm saying about this. If you're in a hotel room and the game that you're at just finished or the game that you're at isn't until later in the night, and there's a game on ESPN and ESPN2 and SEC Network, Arkansas isn't necessarily the first team that you're flipping on. And so I think that this whole process has hurt Mace. And, I do wonder as we get closer if in a way it'll help him because there will be less one-on-one workouts and you'll have to go on the film. And as Phil said a minute ago, you can't help but turn on that film and be impressed by the player that he became. So I don't know if it will ultimately help him or hurt him the way this process has played out. I think right now it's hurting him, but I think as people get deeper into the draft process, I don't know how you can look at the film again for the second or third time, look at where he's come from, listen to interviews that he's done, whether it's with me or other, affiliate stations, whatever, and not sit there and say, like I said a minute ago, that this kid is a guy that you want as part of your organization.
I know we talked about it yesterday. We've had several callers mention in, and there's been videos and everything that's been published about him. He may not be the most polished defender per se. He may not be the most athletic, and Phil kind of prodded in with a baseball perspective. If you can hit a baseball, there's always a spot for you on the roster. And for a scorer like Mason Jones and how he can get to the rim, he can get to the free throw line, he can shoot, he can assist, he can do pretty much everything you need out of an offensive player. There's a spot for him on an NBA roster.
Matt, it's such an important point. And, let's be honest here. Mace is not going to be a top 5 pick. I think we all understand that. I think Mason Jones understands that. Once you get past the 5th pick, the 7th pick, the 10th pick, you're just looking for guys that can do a thing at the NBA level, whether it's shoot the three-point shot, rebound, defend, whatever. And to your point, Matt, this kid can put the ball in the bucket a number of different ways. And I think it's such a great analogy with baseball in the sense that, that with baseball, you're always going to find a spot for a kid that can hit. And in basketball, you do need to put the ball in the basket. Now, everybody thinks they can do it, but few people have proven that they can do it at the level of Mason Jones. But I think it comes back to what I said a minute ago. Once you get past the 6th, 7th, 8th pick, you're just trying to find a guy that can do something, can help your team in some way. You're not actually thinking that you're drafting an NBA All-Star or a franchise-changing player. And we know who Mason Jones is. I think to your point, Matt, we know what his limitations are. but sometimes it's good to know who you are and what you're not when you get to this point in the process, and I think you can absolutely say that with Mason Jones.
And I think for a few Razorback fans, you're still holding out hope that he might accidentally return up to this point as of yesterday, too. And you know this, too, has not hired an agent to this point. So theoretically, he could still come back to Arkansas for his senior year. And the tone that we got from him, and I'm sure you got the same thing we did, I don't think he's coming back, even if his draft report of what he gets from the NBA isn't as favorable as he might like. Just the tone that we thought, he's ready for this challenge and he's ready to tackle it head on.
Yeah, 100%. That was the vibe that I got, too, and I kind of asked him, and he danced around it because, like you said, by technicality, he could still come back. Listen, what I would kind of say is, I know Arkansas fans, even in my own Twitter mentions, have said that, he's quote-unquote making a mistake. One, I'm past the point of saying a kid is making a mistake or not. That's not the lane that I get into. Every kid's from a different situation. I think Mace comes from a pretty good background in terms of maybe his family doesn't, quote-unquote, need the money the way that other families might. But, one, I'm just not in the business of saying what's best for somebody else. But I think beyond that, what I would kind of point to is, think about, if you had told Mason Jones 3 years ago when he was a junior in high school that within 4 years he would be in the contention for SEC Player of the Year, or if you had told somebody else, this kid wasn't even playing high school basketball as a junior. So, at some point, Mason Jones bet on himself and believed in himself in a way that maybe nobody else except for him and his family did. And so if he's going to do it one more time, now is the time. Again, I'm not in the position to say what's best for him, but the one position I am in, guys, is not doubting this kid after what I saw this year and over the last 2 years. So I'm with you, Matt, is that I got the sense talking to him, and it sounds like you guys had a chance to speak with him this week as well. I think his college basketball career is done, and now one more time he's going to have to go prove himself at the next level that he's capable of doing it, and he's done it twice already.
AT, you've been killing it on the podcast. So you had Obi Toppin this week.
Yeah.
Jim Calhoun the week before. And I know that's deep for you getting Calhoun on. I think you've had him on a couple times, but Mason as well. You're getting some you've been getting great guests, but when you get players like, an SEC Player of the Year, a National Player of the Year all in the same week, this is some good stuff.
Well, listen, I'm the Mason Jones of the college basketball or the podcast world, really. People have, guys, if I told you the horror stories of people who have doubted me, and I just keep, I'm like that Undertaker gif on Twitter. I just keep rising up from the grave. Every time they think they stomped out AT, he's back with another interview. What I'll say, guys, and I'm sure that you've experienced this as well. I know we got to go. This has been a great opportunity for me to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't. This quarantine, it's a serious time. Not saying that other people aren't going through some very serious issues. I've been very fortunate. Some more good interviews coming next week. But thank you guys again so much for your support as always. And I do encourage people, go listen to that Obi Toppin, all the interviews, but especially not just Obi Toppin and Jim Calhoun, but Mason Jones as well.
He mentioned The Undertaker. I would like this guy now.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my man right there.
I'm not really a wrestling guy, but I know all the fancy gifts on Twitter. That's what I do know.
I respect you even more.
That's why his nickname is SmackDown. It's right down his alley, AT. We appreciate you.
That's right. I smack down all the competition.
There you
all
go.
All these guys trying to come at me, I just smack them with the side like little gnats.
Yes.
Aaron, have a great weekend, man. Look forward to talking to you again next Friday.
Thanks, AT.
Thanks, fellas.
It's Aaron Torres of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast.
My God, I can't quit smiling today. That was fantastic.
You really